Well, good evening. We're live on YouTube. This is Faye D'Souza. Thank you for joining me. We're talking about, obviously, the very contentious boys' locker room and girls' locker room conversations that have now become public on Instagram. Just to take, it's very unlikely that any of the people tuning in right now aren't aware of what happened. Just to give you an update, of course, there were a group of young teenagers between the ages of 15 and 18 who had created an Instagram messaging group called the Boys Locker Room. On that group, there were conversations about rape. There were conversations about photographs of girls against, without consent. A 15-year-old schoolboy has now been held. The police have identified 20 others. Most of them belong to posh South Delhi schools. They were saying things like, we could easily rape her. Let's go there and gang rape her. Let's call 2 more boys. Let's gang rape her. That sort of stuff. Most people who read about it were obviously very, very upset. The police have actually filed an FIR now, bringing in punishment for forgery, using a forged image as genuine. They've intent to insult the modesty of a woman and transmitting obscene material in an electronic form under the IT Act. Now, the other thing that happened post that was that there was another group conversation, which is effectively being called the girls' locker room, that was also released, where there was perhaps similar sort of conversation happening about men. Here's the question. Should the members of this group, minors as they were, should they be prosecuted? Is this, and there's been a sort of difference of opinion here about how some people have felt that maybe this is society failing these minors, and maybe what we need right now is counseling and proper guidance. Others have called for stronger action. Swati Maliwal, for example, of the Delhi Commission for Women, has called for strong action. That's the question we're asking right now. Your comments also popping up on our YouTube page, and we'll take those questions. But first, let me bring in my guests. I have Mr. Sanjay Hegde, who's a senior advocate with the Supreme Court. Mr. Hegde, thank you for joining us. I appreciate your time. Also, Karuna Anandi is an advocate, Ritesh Bhatia, cybersecurity expert, and we may have Dr. Ranjana Kumari, director of the Center for Social Research, join us as well. If I may begin with Mr. Hegde. Mr. Hegde, good evening. Do you believe that there should be prosecution in this case?
No, there are two questions. Should there be prosecution? Should there be prosecution as adults? There is a process under the Juvenile Justice Act, insofar as people who are below the age of 18 is concerned. Yes. They are children. If there are proceedings under the Juvenile Justice Act, then they are children in conflict with the law. There, as you know, the maximum period of reformation in a reform school would be 3 years. However, after the Nirbhaya incident, there has been an amendment to the law which says that between the ages of 16 and 18, if there are circumstances which warrant it, then they can be prosecuted as adults.
Yes.
Now, if you are asking me whether they should be prosecuted as adults, I do not think the standards laid down even under the amendment, and I must tell you that I was opposed to that amendment because it brings in a lot of fuzzy logic into the law. Often it is a question of discretion. Oh, this is so heinous, therefore we must prosecute. This is not so heinous, and it just leaves too much uncertainty out there. I do not think that mere conversation, no matter how bad, on an electronic forum would warrant a prosecution as adults, especially because we've all been young. You know that we've all been young, and when we get older, we drink and we feel young. But everything that you say on a locker, in a locker room, in an informal chat room, you do not act upon. You may entertain the thought, but unless there is concrete action, there is nothing prosecutable, even as adults. Now, I do not think, I only have a cursory knowledge of what all was said on that locker room, but I
Yes.
do not think there was anything which was acted upon or was actionable in that sense of the word. Again, even as far as action is concerned, it may be one person who expressed that thought. Let's go and do that. The others neither say yes nor no, but they're there in the locker room.
Yes.
They may have seen the chat, they may not have seen the chat. You can't target everybody with the same brush. So there are very many questions of nuance here.
All right, so I just want to bring up some of the things that are being said right now. Radhika Batra says, it riles me up. What are parents teaching their children at this point? Ujjant Ramesh, it's not the parents' fault. It's the conditioning that's happened over the years. Shah Mohammed says they should be charged and prosecuted. Radhika Batra says, I'm a mom too of a teenager, and it all goes into how you raise your children. And I'm going to keep reading out some of the messages that are coming in. But Karuna Nandi, very interesting point that Sanjay Hegde has pointed out. He says, for as long as no action was actually taken on this conversation and it was just talk, technically no crime was committed. And also, what about the others who were just bystanders in that group, innocent or otherwise, who hadn't actually hadn't said or done anything? Should they also be prosecuted? What is your response to that?
I think it's completely incorrect to misunderstand the hate speech laws that currently exist on our books and the incitement to violence. There is the IPC, there is the IT Act, there's Section 509, which speaks of outraging the modesty of a woman. There's Section 354A, which speaks of, and also violating her privacy. A lot of people don't know that 509 also speaks of violations of privacy. There's 354C that speaks of sharing pictures. Nude pictures were shared without the consent of the person. There's a whole phalanx of laws that come into play here that are unrelated to an act of physical violence, right?
Yes.
The thing to understand, and the thing for everyone to understand, is that there are hate speech acts that perpetuate violence. There are hate speech acts, and there is sort of sharing of these nudes, for example, that are understood as a certain kind of not just an invasion of privacy, but an invasion of mental safety and a perpetuation of discrimination and a perpetuation of a likelihood of violence that is also to be understood from a woman's perspective. This is not me saying this as a feminist. I'm speaking as someone quoting from the Puttaswamy judgment, where Justice Chandrachud spoke of Catherine McKinnon's jurisprudence on privacy, for example.
Yes.
Right? So I think that there are a lot of people, and some people on this panel included, that have made extremely sexist jokes, including in the corridors of the Supreme Court, and laughed it off as being something that is, when objected to, have laughed it off as being something that is, just a joke. It's really important to remember that this undermines people's professionalism, that this undermines, that this guy not objecting to chat rooms perpetuates violence, perpetuates a kind of mindset that is absolutely unacceptable and is the kind of thing that leads to rape, whether it's marital rape, and let's remember that 90% of the rapes that happen in this country are in the context of marriage, right? And it's treated very differently from stranger rape, because everyone wants a death sentence for stranger rape, and people are asking for gentleness and understanding when it comes to the boys' locker room. Now, I am not for the death sentence when it comes to stranger rape, but I am also not for these young people being prosecuted as adults. I think that the Juvenile Justice Act actually provides a really excellent framework through which to deal with such offenses. Because what it does is it acknowledges the fact that over the age of 7 and under the age of 18, you have to take responsibility for an offense that you may have, you have been found to have committed, right? Yes. That you are not to be prosecuted as an adult because your brain is not as developed as an adult's brain is developed, but you have to take responsibility. The second thing that it does is that it creates a framework of restorative justice. So it gives you the ability to So it gives you the ability as a juvenile justice board to bring in the victim, to bring in a school, to bring in a counselor, to bring in everybody's parents, if the victim wants to be a part of it, right? If the victim says, look, I want nothing to do with this, then there's absolutely no reason that she should be. But if she does, then her sense of justice is something that must be addressed. Also, it provides for detention, not in a school, but in an observation home, right? And believe me, these are not great, right? These are actually very much lectures.
Ms. Nandi, do you then agree that if similar behavior, and it possibly has been noticed in what was called the girls' locker room, should bring about similar, legal reactions as well? Because technically, even today, our rape laws and our sexual harassment laws are not gender neutral. They're not reversible based on gender.
So I haven't seen, what I've seen in the girls' locker room is a sort of strange patriarchal bullying of other women. And that's what I've seen from the girls' locker room hashtag. Now, that is something that is deeply distasteful and perpetuates particular mindsets. But I also think that there are two things. That look, girls don't themselves, it's like a self-hating trope, right? They themselves are not benefiting from the patriarchy and the misogyny that they are putting up. They themselves are going to suffer from it. One. Two, that's not the way our law is framed at the moment. So I think that is a different, more nuanced discussion.
Okay, so I also want to now just quickly bring in Ritesh Bhatia. Ritesh Bhatia is a cybersecurity expert, and the reason why his voice is very interesting in this conversation is because Ritesh gets phone calls, distress phone calls, from people whose photographs are being used on the internet, from people who receive blackmail phone calls, deep fakes being used, sort of sexual bullying on the internet. So he actually has first-hand understanding of what sort of an impact this sort of behavior has on an individual who may be a victim. Ritesh, you've said you received a bunch of phone calls since this news broke out. Could you tell us the nature of these phone calls? Obviously, you can't share the names, but the nature of these phone calls.
So most of these people who were calling up, especially like they were girls, not that the boys weren't there, even the even the boys were bullied like very badly. And firstly, they have been crying like anything. It seems like, as if, okay, they had like held up, or, they had like kept it as like a dark secret inside, and they just wanted to vent out. They just wanted to talk. And they were, of course, quite, we couldn't console them also. But then finally, when we happened to talk to them, most of them were like sexual in nature. There was like body shaming, slut shaming, and, technology has made it very easy also. And especially these platforms, they have made it like very easy. And unfortunately, actions are not being taken. So I would say, Faye, maximum is everything is obscene. So either it could be photographs, or it is a lot of bad language, literally a language, as Karuna rightly said, even in the girls' locker room, is the girls like, making very distasteful comments about other girls. In fact, one of the girls whom I know now very well, she was actually so disturbed with this girls' locker room that she slit her wrist. And the cops had come, and yet no action was there, because I feel there's a lot of fear also about the parents or the children going to the cops. And cops also really need to be sensitized about this particular matter. And Faye, even you must have heard about a 16-year-old boy today who committed suicide. Because I think this, Instagram has now become like a social media trial, the way certain news channels are, wherein the anchor conducts the trial. And this is one problem of this social media. Everybody over here is a judge giving a verdict without realizing what is happening.
Okay, all right. So Ritesh, let me just break down this conversation. So obviously, even for our audience, we've built some audience in the last 10 minutes. Even for our audience, there are two different parts of this conversation. One is the legal side of it, the FIR, the trial, the kind of punishment that that's being called upon, and the impact it will have on the lives of these students, which is also something that's being discussed. The other is the social and the cultural sort of backdrop against which behavior like this occurs among our teenagers. So I just want to work through the legal question first. Mr. Sanjay Hegde has been listening very carefully. Mr. Hegde, you heard Ms. Nandi's argument about the fact that this sort of patriarchy eventually does lead to rape, and this is the point at which we must stop it. I also want to point out that there have been several people who've popped up over the last 48 hours and said things like, do we want their lives and their careers and their futures to be ruined over this talk? Can we solve this by counseling? Can we solve this by making them do social service? Is there a softer way to handle this? Which of the two do you agree with? And what is your response to Ms. Nandi's argument that this sort of patriarchal talk eventually leads to rape and abuse of different kinds?
Well, talk leads to so many things, but ultimately, as the law, as I understand it, does not penalize talk.
That's incorrect. That's incorrect. But I'll let you finish and then I'll address your.
You can continue. You can continue. I don't need to. I don't need to. You've been obnoxious through this earlier also. I've kept quiet.
Okay.
And you can continue. You can continue. That's exactly why. That's exactly why.
Many witnesses. Responsibility has to be taken for what is correct and what is
all right.
That is exactly why I do not wish to be on any conversation where the other side simply just keeps on giving adjectives. Now, it's entirely up to you. You want to continue?
Why don't you finish?
No, you want to continue. You can continue.
All right. Okay.
You can
Mr.
continue.
Hegde, you finish what you were saying.
No,
you did say that the law. No, forgive me.
So the law is very simple. As long as there is no action,
Okay.
people may be responsible for what they say. If what they say has consequences, then alone there is actionable things in the law. Now somebody incites violence on a television channel, anti-social media. Unless there is actual violence that follows, that is there is no case made out. You may, of course, have some perspective of the law that this is what the law is meant to be. Please go right ahead, get elected, look down upon the rest of the world which doesn't agree with you. Do what you want on that.
Mr. Hegde,
The law as it currently stands.
Let's read out the IPC.
Currently stands.
Let's read out the IPC, Mr. Hegde. Once you're finished, I'll read out the IPC to you.
You can continue the conversation. I'm not taking any further part in it.
Okay, no. So, one second. Before I bring in Ms. Nandi, I just want to clear one thing. When these boys say, "Let's bring two other boys and let's go gang rape her," is it possible that may fall under conspiracy to commit a crime? Secondly, if it was a group of a large number, yes.
Let's put it this way: those two boys say it, then they actually there is a meeting of mind in conspiracy. Okay. After the meeting of minds, then there is action taken. They go near the girl's house. That is when the process is complete. There is something to prosecute. Otherwise, listen, I may have done more prosecutions and defenses than most people have dreamt of. But the point is that unless there is specific action, there is no case. And this is for the law as it applies to adults. Right now, we are talking of boys between 16 and 18, including, as Ritesh pointed out, boys who, when faced with such kind of anti-social media trials, some people just jump out of their houses. Now, are you to say that the person that those who discussed what is to be done with these boys like this in the boys' locker room, are they guilty of that suicide? Are you going to apply the same standard there? No. Okay. So please, first and foremost, those of us who have children know that there is a problem. there is a problem among the way boys talk. There is a problem among the way girls talk. There is a problem in the way boys and girls don't talk to their families. Everybody is in their little spaces, talking continuously on the phone, on chats. 100 things happen. Before any of those conversations have consequences, legal consequences, criminal law consequences, there has to be an overt action in pursuance of that conspiracy. Okay. Otherwise, if you and I were to discuss that such and such an anchor is such a bully, and I hope X, Y, or Z happens, is the conspiracy over?
Okay. So, okay, now let me bring in Ms. Karuna Nandi. Ms. Nandi, do you want to respond to that? Also, does this, because this is a closed group in which these conversations did happen, does it qualify as defamation or the intent to outrage the modesty of a woman because this was done among a closed group? Where does the law stand on that, Ms. Nandi?
Okay. First, let's address the misconception that speech cannot be a criminal offense. This is not law as I wish it to be. In fact, I think some of it is a bit overbroad and some of it is significantly overbroad. However, I do think that there is hate speech with regard to women that should be hate speech, and it currently is and has been prosecuted successfully a large number of times. Let me remind us all of the judgment in Rupan Deol Bajaj, which was Section 354, but also other provisions. Let us also remember that there is the Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, that's civil law, but under the IPC itself, as well as under the IT Act, there are various provisions. As I said previously, there are Section 509, there's Section 354A, there's Section 67 and Section 67A of the IT Act that do not require any physical assault or any conspiracy to physical assault. That it is the speech itself that is considered sufficiently damaging to have, so that it is therefore criminal, right? Now, it may bring a fine. It may bring, if you're an adult, a day in jail, or some of them don't have minimum thresholds, but some of them, under the juvenile justice legislation, the provisions that I have cited would not cause these young people to be prosecuted as adults, because there's a recent judgment of January 2020 in the Shilpa Mittal case, right? In which the court decided that if there is a 7-year punishment and there is no minimum sentence, the benefit of the doubt will be given, and the benefit of the ambiguity rather will be given, and the person will be prosecuted as a juvenile, right? So I just want to be absolutely clear that anchors are not a protected category, because there is no historical discrimination against anchors. Women are a constitutionally protected category because there is a historical, there is a history of historical discrimination constitutionally recognized against women. Also Dalit, also a number of other categories, right? Therefore, we do treat sort of speech against anchors. Anchors are protected against speech, defamatory speech, for instance, but hate speech does not operate in that way. Now, coming to your question on whether Mr. Souza, on the
closed group,
private nature, on the closed group aspect, right, is that doesn't matter. That publication, for example, for defamation, it doesn't matter if it's not to a huge group. It can be a small group, and that makes no difference. Yeah.
Okay, let me just introduce Ranjana Kumari, who's just joined us. Ranjana Kumari heads the Center for Social Research. She does amazing social work, both for women's rights and for rights of minorities and the poor in this country. Ms. Kumari, good evening, and thank you for joining us. On the question particularly of these locker room chats, and I have people popping up saying, what about the girls' locker room? What about the girls' locker room? What about the girls' locker room? My question to you is this: do you believe that there should be criminal prosecution in either case or both cases?
Well, I think, first of all, about this particular case, it's a matter of concern because it is really a deep sickness which has emerged. Children do what they see people, adults doing. If they have been not trained, taught any kind of cyber etiquette, then they are definitely doing something which is a kind of replicatory behavior. They just see something and say, just do it, because they also want to know, learn, and things like that. So I think that's one part of it. That is not to say what they did and the kind of discussion they had, the kind of chatting that they were doing is forgivable. It's really not, because after all, if we have got to know, and there is a law against virism, there's law against this kind of thing online, then we definitely have to take care of that. But there are two issues that I would like to flag here, and especially very, very strong issues. Two, that there's somebody who's showing some kind of a PowerPoint. Is that part of the discussion?
Yes, it is. It's just our graphics to support the discussion. We're learning how to do this now off television.
Faye, first of all, you can't imagine how happy I am to see you here, to see you, and how excited that things are moving well, and we will get our spaces again back. So, and anyway, having said that, I think there are two things. I also happen to serve on the International Advisory Board of Facebook and also Twitter, where we are looking at many ways of controlling, doing things, giving the possibility of to the user. But this is between company and the user. What is happening at the moment is that a lot of parents are not understanding that this whole cyber times that we have entered all of a sudden, this is a kind of tunnel through which, when we have come out, we are realizing the space is so huge. All kinds of material is available, on all kinds of discussion you can have. There are immense possibilities of learning, and as well as just doing what these boys were doing, and much worse than that. There is an app where you can just have somebody sitting in front of you wearing a sari and you can see the person nude. There are so many things. I mean, I cannot describe to you that the way people have come up with all kinds of ways to, commodify women and criminalize and things like that. So I would think first responsibility is, especially the age group which was doing it, of the parents to do digital parenting. You cannot afford to say any more in given the time that we are living and have moved into without knowing is, I think, to know what it is going on the web. You must know. You can take pride in, my son knows, my son can do this, my son knows how, he guides me how to be online. But please find out what he's doing and guide him into it. Tell him how to protect, because today they are abusing women. They are doing, they have this.
So
yes.
I actually, if I may, I want to place before the panel, and we talked about the legal aspect of it. I want to talk about the social aspect of it. And, Ms. Nandi and Mr. Hegde had different points of view as to how this should be treated under the IPC or the criminal law. But I want to ask you this. As a woman journalist who is present on Twitter, I can tell you that the stuff that was said in the boys' locker room did not surprise me, because this is what is said to women on Twitter on a daily basis. Yes, and by adults, not by children, by adults. Filthy, disgusting, abusive, angry, threatening things get said to women. And we have normalized it in these public forums of social media. Are we sending that message now to our teenagers, saying this sort of behavior is okay because the adults are doing it? And everybody's looking at it and nobody seems to mind. Ms. Kumari first.
Yes, Faye. I think what is important also is that you look at the way we have been all given rape threats. I remember having helped a journalist whose daughter was threatened. And, it's about 4-year back story when we got the guy arrested. But the thing is that and then abuses, my goodness, they can say anything to anybody. And not to only women, to male politicians, to male social workers, to anybody, anything that they want to say. And choicest of abuse, this has really become a place of filth. This is filth. This is just filth. And we need to really be very careful about that. So socially, schools should take responsibility. You have started taking online classes. Have you ever put your children through safety online? Has schools given any kind of training to the teachers? All of a sudden, you open the phone and they're. So I think lot of this. And then again, just the last point, that do we have laws enough she was talking about the law just before me, the panelist. I just came a little late. But do we have enough laws to protect, to secure cyber safety of our citizens, women, men, children? Do you know how much child pornography has been watched by Indians? 92%. 92% sites have been opened by Indians to see a child pornography. So I think it's really, we really have to wake up. We have to wake up. We are in a different situation, the new normal that we are talking about. And these children should be going through a serious counseling.
Mr. Hegde, I want to circle this back to what adults do in public, which is on social media, and the kind of things that are said. Do you believe we need to have stronger either laws or implementation of those laws, so that at some point we need to send this message to teenagers that this behavior is not okay, that it will not be tolerated, and it's against the law?
Well, I do not have that misconception that teenagers will listen to adults. Teenagers live in a different world. They're far advanced, and
no, you have to be more advanced than them.
No. Yeah, we can but try tell them as far as our values are concerned, and also as far as the possibility of trouble is concerned, and that if anything happens, that they are responsible for their actions. Now, those they may seem like platitudes, but those need to be done. As far as abuse on Twitter or on social media is concerned, yes, women get it much more. But you've seen my account on Twitter when I had it. Ranjana, you must do something about that. That's a separate story. But when I had it, I also got abused in my own way. Of course, not that much, because people did not want to take a fight with a lawyer. If I had not been a lawyer, then probably I would have got much more. But I don't teenagers take a cue from adults as far as social media is concerned. Teenagers do take cues from their adults insofar as adults act within the house. How a man treats his wife has a great impact on how a child sees other women, or how a father treats any woman anywhere. All those do have their impact. But Faye, this is one thing I must say, that you can't tar everybody on every group with the same amount of punishment. Many a time, somebody is on a group, somebody has been added on a group. There's nonsense happening on that group. People don't react. People mute it. People don't want to lose those friends in real life. So
Sure.
the levels of responsibility have to be very carefully calibrated, and we cannot also be guilty of exactly the same thing, of having a virtuous group of people who condemn it so much that those children have no locus penitentiae.
Well, Ms. Nandi, I want to bring you in on one particular thing that keeps popping up in the comment section. There's one individual, although I do not agree with him, but this has come up so much, who keeps saying that first women put up, or girls put up photographs which are attractive, saying, look at me. And then at the same time, they say, don't objectify me. So there's obviously a misunderstanding here between why women dress at all, and if that is in any way an attraction to or an invitation to be objectified. Do you want to respond to that?
Mr. Ambani's house in Antilla, I believe it's called. It's a big
Yes.
house, fancy, lots of photographs taken. Is that an invitation for you to go and invade it? Even if I were to take your example of, let's even presume that women are objects, right? If women were objects, if women were only the sum of their body parts, is that an invitation to go and take and do something about it, rather than understanding viscerally that you are not the sum of your body parts, or you are not a single body part? You are a human being. And as a human being, you have a right to say no. Now remember, that if somebody doesn't have a right to say no, they also don't have a right to say yes, right? Which means that if a woman likes someone who is, she thinks is wonderful and they have a great relationship, then she might say yes to a particular act. And in such a case, that is voluntary and there is joyful engagement. And if you are taking away the right to say no, you are also losing out on that. The thing to remember fundamentally is that this is not allowed. It's criminal behavior. So you need to stop it, frankly, because the state understands that people have a right to say no. And if you indulge in such behavior, you can discuss this morality. If you indulge in such behavior, the criminal law, will hopefully act against you. But just remember that it can act against you, right? That you can be put in detention. And I also just want to add one last thing to this particular intervention, which is that people don't just act based on how their parents treat their wives, for example, right? Children also act based on the kinds of jokes that are made around them. People also act on the kinds of attitudes that are seen to be acceptable to women, whether women are sexualized, whether women are, and I'm not saying that all of this should be made criminal, but I'm saying that there are messages that are going down to these children, and a kind of serious misogyny, and particularly a sexual misogyny, is being perpetuated unmediated from generation to generation, which now I am glad that we are seeing the kind of pushback that there is, and there has to be this absolute clarity about it. Yes, it is true that somebody who is silent on the group doesn't have the same criminal responsibility at all as somebody who who said something positively, but at the same time, the person who was silent must remember that you are part of the problem.
All right, let me just bring in Ritesh Bhatia. Ritesh, here's the thing, and it's not just the trolling that happens on Twitter. It's the jokes that are made. It's the deep fakes, the sexual blackmailing, the nude photographs. There's a lot of this child pornography, as Ms. Kumari quite rightly pointed out. There's a lot of this going on the internet right now. We do have an IT Act that's meant to protect us from all of these wrongdoings. Does that act have teeth? Because I know that you deal with it on a daily basis. Are we able to make any sort of dent in the criminality on the internet, the sexual criminality on the internet, with the laws and the policing that we have right now?
So if I have to tell you about this child sexual abusive material, which everybody incorrectly calls it as child pornography, because a child cannot be involved in a pornography, so it's ideally CSAM, what we call it as. So there's a lot of it. So there's a lot of it on the dark web, and wherever there has been in India, the cops have been like cops of different states, especially of Maharashtra, Kerala, they have really actually gone and done a lot of it. But having said that, a lot of things related to sextortion, that is like revenge pornography, is like rising, and that we are seeing quite a lot. A lot of mistake is there of the kids also, of the teens and the tweens also, and even they need to realize that they cannot share there are such kind of sensitive information to anybody else. You may be thinking that it is just on your phone and the opposite person's phone, but no, in the cyberspace, it's everywhere. So the digital footprints always remain. They always remain. So and you also need to understand another thing, that when you're going to go up, let's say go to some high schools or business schools or into US, or even you're going to apply for jobs, all these footprints can really be seen, or can be discovered, or can be found also with experts, without experts also. So we've got to be very careful about what we are talking. In fact, many corporates, the way you have background checks, you also have background checks of your social media. So lastly, Faye, I want to talk, when we were talking about this technology point of view, and please understand now, the deep nude is evolving. So what is like really the deep nude? You know, you just take a picture of a particular person, and the computer, it's not even you who's doing a Photoshop, what we call as morphing. The computer does that. The computer understands, okay, look, this is the color of the face, so the body color will also be like this, the texture will be like this, the background remains exactly as is. Within seconds, you're able to get that. And hence, sometimes, you know, when we fall into for all this sari challenge and other kind of things, it worries me.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes. Yes, I totally agree with you, Ritesh. And also, can I come in, Faye, for just a few?
Yes, Miss Kumari, yes, come in. But let me just add to that question, to what I want to ask you. So obviously, like Ritesh pointed out, there's a lot more that we need to be talking to our children and our teenagers about never ever sending a photograph to somebody, never sending a nude to somebody, being super careful about what you put on your phone, and how that will have an impact on your future. But also, we've had this sort of vague, bare bones idea of sex ed in our schools, which even by itself doesn't work. Should we be teaching our children about consent, about how it's important for boys to have the consent of girls, how it's important for girls to respect boys and vice versa? The idea that consent is important is perhaps a conversation we don't have enough in this country.
Well, Faye, when Karuna was mentioning, no has to be understood as no, and also that there is issue of consent, and you also are emphasizing that. I totally agree with you that, there is absolutely no understanding of consent. Boys are so entitled in our society. They are given so much of space for making mistakes, and girls are not given that space for making any mistakes. So in that sense also, that we do have a kind of entitlement where they don't understand. They think it is their right. They think that it is okay. They think that, Papa made that joke about some friend's wife or something like, it's okay. What's wrong with that? And, all these evening culture that, it's South Delhi, it's a very elite school. You should not be shocked, because when you go to all these so-called very elitist evenings, you know what people talk, you know how people really behave with each other. And so children are observing that. Children are watching all that. They want to, have that kind of fun in their own life also. There is a huge curiosity about sex, sexual act, about, knowing each other. We should not leave that aspect out. Now, having said that, I think consent is absolutely important. It is a must. We have to ingrain in every child's head that, look, if somebody says no, it is no. You cannot. And if you did something after that, then you will be held responsible and all that. Now, other thing that is very important, and I think I agree with Ritesh completely, is that, we are behind the technology. We are not understanding. Our laws are far behind the technology. We are not understanding where all this technology is moving. It's going so fast. This whole messenger room by Facebook. I mean, so many things which is coming, and how we are talking to each other. It is one thing to be fearful that my records will be known. It is another thing to know that it is wrong. Fine, you will be penalized for if you've done anything wrong, but please don't do it, because it is wrong. Commodifying women's body is wrong. Imagine talking about rape and talking about group rape and all that stuff. You just are wrong, baby. You've never understood that this is something which you cannot afford to do in this anymore. You just but then then we have rape jokes. We have even big programs which became very popular. People have talked about, even Coffee with Karan, they talked about rape jokes. I think this is something which we really have to now get out of that culture. Everybody has to collectively do that to teach our young, because online you are not safe. And we have a very organized program which we are marketing. We are trying to marketing this sense for free, of course, but trying to talk to school principals and teachers that please take up this program. There is an online safety module. There is a digital parenting module. Europe is preparing itself very well. America is preparing. That is why from 3 to 13-year-old can go online. And now
all right. So I have run out of time, but Ms. Kumari, very quickly, there are parents writing in right now saying, how do we access this information on talking to our kids about consent? How do they get in touch with you?
Yes, please get in touch with me, and also please go to Facebook, Snapchat, and whatever. I mean, this is the Insta, whatever platform that you are in. Please go. There are inbuilt mechanisms within the platform to really tell you what your child is doing. You can find out. I mean, I'm not saying you police your children, but please don't say, I don't
Please,
know, my children are smarter than me. Please don't make that statement. We have to be smarter than our children to guide them properly and to lead them to living life where they are not abusing, accusing, and doing the same thing as their parents'
All right.
generation did.
On resources, I have one resource to just contribute very quickly. We've been doing a program with ITC Vivel where I designed with ITC Vivel a legal education program on consent and on other legal rights. And those are being taught across colleges around the country. There are some videos also that's been created. And ask your college to request this program, and the college will, they would be happy to come. And I think so. That's one resource where consent is taught, legal rights and legal duties are taught.
Mr. Hegde, last word. Do you believe
Excellent.
that parents at this point need to be looking through their children's phones, reading those messages, understanding what's going on before it sort of gets away from us?
Well, would you like your spouse to read your phone? This is where that I don't think I have an answer. I'm asking you because this is where treating your child as an adult comes in.
Not 14, 15-year-old, not 14, 15-year-old, Mr. Hegde. And also, husbands do sneak into wives' phones. Let me tell you.
I don't.
You are a nice man. Don't.
Well, my answer to that, if I may, as it's probably the only thing I'm qualified to answer because I do have a husband, is that husbands and wives are both adults who can take individual responsibility for their actions. And if I, for example, get indicted for doing something illegal, my husband is not automatically responsible for that. But when we are talking about a minor, a 14-year-old, 13-year-old, 15-year-old, as a parent, I suppose there is some legal responsibility or there's some moral responsibility to make sure that at least until this person hits the legal age of 18, that you're keeping a larger eye. Now, I do know this is great on paper, but in person, teenagers hate it when parents, read their messages, try and understand what's going on in their conversations. It's very like, Mom, why can't you mind your own business? So it becomes then a really sensitive, dangerous place to navigate because they'll lock down even further, hide even more from you if they feel you don't respect them. So I suppose that this is, a larger conversation, maybe a longer conversation on parenting. But for today, we have run out of time. I do want to thank my panelists. Just to put it in a nutshell for our viewers who've just joined in, this is what was said. Mr. Sanjay Hegde, talking about the legality of it, he did say that those people who were just bystanders in that group who didn't say anything are technically shouldn't be held responsible in the same manner as those who have said something. Also, he argued that if you've just said something, you haven't acted on it, then technically you haven't broken the law. Ms. Karuna Nandi had a very different point of view. She talked about the fact that words in our IPC, in our law, are in fact illegal, and this sort of behavior seeds, and these are the seeds sprouting to misogyny and then crime against women in the future. It has to be nipped in the bud right now in both gender cases. She also pointed out that what was said in the girls' locker room, while it was distasteful and kind of icky, it wasn't talking about physically assaulting, sexually assaulting somebody else. Ritesh Bhatia made a very important point that we need to keep an eye on what our kids are doing. We need to have a full, how we have these conversations with children about how you don't talk to strangers and you look both sides before crossing the street. There's a new world we need to start educating them about the internet and how to be on the internet and be safe on the internet. And that's something maybe you find out about that separately. Ranjana Kumari, very importantly, talking about how consent, the idea of being responsible for your actions, and the idea of being a responsible society, a member of society of both genders, is something we need to teach our children at this very young age. All right, that brings me to the end of this conversation, and I'm so glad that so many of you tuned in, and I hope you found it helpful. To my panelists, I am always grateful for your generosity of time. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Thank you for watching.